Hello guys, today we will be talking about What if Naruto went back in time part 8. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let begin. Piashithi commotion drew him from his office. It was impossible not to notice, and had he ignored it would cast him in ill light within the clan. Not that the clan, at least the branch half of it, saw him in any good light recently. He walked briskly to the Hyuga Gardens. In springtime the flowers reached full bloom, filling the air with their fragrance and creating a stark contrast against the sharp white walls of the Hyuga compound. He could hear the argument now, and as he processed it, it drew a scowl to his face. Shut up. The voice was definitely not a Hyuga. No Hyuga, not even a child, would be so uncouth as to yell so loud in the clan compound. You're wrong. Fate cannot be changed. And that was Niji. A scowl came to his face. His nephew, so many mistakes made. So many regrets over the past few years. It didn't escape Hiashi, he escaped the fate of his brother by luck alone. It didn't escape him that his brother had been the more skilled, the more talented of them two, and it was only by chance, by happenstance, that he was clan head. It was only by chance his children would inherit the position of clan head. Only by chance. It was also only by the love of his brother that he was still alive. Luck had been on his side since the day he was born. It had been luck that had let him be born first. It had been luck that his brother had been there to deflect that kunai that would have killed him on his first C-rank mission. It had been luck that his brother loved him enough to give his life for him to live on. Hiashi had loved his brother, and now, despite what the boy might think, he loved his nephew. He moved into the gardens as the last of these thoughts flighted into his mind. A blonde-haired boy was arcing with his nephew in the gardens. Niji seemed annoyed in that new cynical way he'd taken to things since his father's death. The blonde boy seemed even more so. His sky-blue eyes fierce and determined, an active scowl making his whiskered face look oddly fierce. Uzumaki Naruto. His eyes flicked around to find their Jounin-sensei, and sure enough the smiling visage of Kakashi Haddock could be found sitting in a tree watching the argument with apathy. Their eyes met, and Kakashi nodded, handing control of the situation over to him. Lazy bastard. What seems to be the problem? The argument stopped when heard his voice. Niji looked up angrily, then down in apprehension when he saw the look of annoyance on his face. The Uzumaki boy seemed unperturbed by the entire thing. His blue eyes looked at him, staring at him with an intensity far, far, far beyond his years. He says, "I'm not going to be anything." He's not. He shouldn't be here anyway. Hiashi eyes looked at the blonde, most notably the headband tied tightly around his forehead, pulling his wild spiky hair close to the skull. He turned back to his nephew and raised an eyebrow. He'd always been lucky, and it was luck that brought the Uzumaki boy and his team so close to him so early. Everyone had their eyes on Kakashi's Haddock's team. A squad of young geniuses. But no one knew exactly how good they were, how skilled they were currently, or how far they could reach. Three children before him could eventually become a new version of the Sannin. Nay, even more powerful than them. Everyone had their eyes on them, or would, if Kakashi Haddock let anyone close enough to observe. He has a headband. He's part of the genin team that was hired to weed the gardens. I don't know how the two of you came to find strife with one another. However, he turned to the tree where their sensei seemed to lounge, oblivious or uncaring of this all. He scowled, no doubt uncaring. Kakashi Haddock was too good of a ninja to miss much, if anything ever. If you wish to come to arms about it, we can go to the training grounds, and you can spare to settle the matter. Kakashi leapt from the tree then. He had a masked smile on his face, but his eyes were cold like ice. Hiashi raised an eyebrow at the man. It would seem that wasn't quite as callous as he made himself out to be. The highly focused killing intent that now landed on him, and only him, was somewhat of a surprise as well. I'll do it. The blonde's eyes were hard as ice. Naruto, it's not good to be in the habit of fighting the clients. No, Kakashi-sen, I think this would be a good learning experience for both my nephew and your students. Hiashi drawled out. He almost had to gasp for breath when the killing intent focused on him doubled. Kakashi's smile was gone, and now only ice-cold eyes stared at him. There was no pretense of friendliness. Sensei, I think it's a good idea. I mean, all we do is spar each other. We need to fight other people our age, right? A voice not yet heard drew his attention. It was the pink-haired girl. Finally the Uchiha chimed in as well. I want to see Naruto fight him. The three seemed to have reached a consensus. Kakashi Haddock was quiet for a moment, but then, finally relented. That would be a good idea, I suppose. And we have finished with the gardening. Kakashi's eyes remained focused on him and only him. Let's go to the training grounds. They arrived at the training grounds some 10 minutes later, and Hiashi could say he was somewhat excited. He wanted to see what the Hokage was trying to keep so secret. What exactly about this team did he do his best to keep away from the general public? At least for now. The Hyuga training grounds were empty when they arrived, other than some mannequins marked with comment and Ketsu. All Hyuga children were forced to memorize. The Uzumaki boy seemed to be somewhat excited despite his anger. His chakra there was so much of it for someone so young spiked in anticipation and excitement. Two young boys went to the center of the training grounds, while Kakashi's team and he watched from afar. Naruto, no explosives. Hiashi turned somewhat surprised, but the now pouty look on the blonde's face told him it wasn't a joke at his expense. The blonde pulled out a pair of kunai, double standard length, and having the matte gray color of chakra-conducting metal. Then he twisted them in his hand. He took a tight, concise stand. Niji took the standard Hyuga Juken form. It was perfect. His feet were firm and widely spaced. His arms were loose yet held in position. Begin. The Hyuga clan head called out. The blonde disappeared in a blur of speed, his form closing the distance between him and Niji. Chakra-enhanced speed, Hiashi realized. Of course the children on Kakashi's team were still just that, children. Not even teenagers. The only way they'd be able to face older opponents would be chakra-enhanced skills, along with rigorous training. The gap closed before he could blink, and before Niji could react. The Uzumaki boy danced around Niji for a few moments, slashing and cutting with lightly before pulling away at the last second. Niji's chakra-enhanced palm was extended. The boy smirked and closed the gap again. He was fast, faster than Niji could react. Cuts, tiny little things started to appear all over Niji's body. It soon became apparent it was much less a spar and more a lesson in humility for his nephew. The Uzumaki boy was fast, and he was devastatingly effective with those kunai. Niji was losing Naruto. Kakashi's voice was curt. The Uzumaki boy's speed doubled, and the cuts stopped being shallow. They were deeper now, and Niji's cream-white shirt was becoming pink with his blood. Naruto. Kakashi's voice was harder now, more steel backing it than ever. Finish it. Finish it. Uzumaki Naruto did. He stopped his dance around Niji and slammed the ringed handle of his blade into his nephew's head. Niji fell unconscious, and Hiashi sighed. He's quite skilled, wouldn't you say? He got no response from Kakashi Haddock. He looked at his unconscious nephew, leaned down and picked him in his arms. I believe the garden is adequately weed-free, Kakashi-san. You and your team may leave, but do stop by the kitchens and get yourself something to drink. It's rather hot today. My team is fine, Hiashi-san. Hiashi held back his tongue at such blatant disrespect. Sharingan no Kakashi was an A-rank ninja for a reason. You may leave then. He grabbed his team by the shoulder, and they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Team 7 Sakura rolled under the swipe, swung her leg, another punch, and he heard a faint cracking sound as blood, hot rich blood dripped down his nose. A third punch and he felt one of his teeth chip and mouth split. He swirled the blood with his spit into her eyes, and brought a fistful of dirt up as well to accompany it. She leapt off him, her face a mask of anger. Then Sasuke came, a black blur that barreled into him, knocking him over. He replaced himself almost instantly, dodging the sword swipe. When the technique was finished, he was standing in the flat field of the training ground, watching his two teammates. His bleeding face looked at his two teammates, a small smirk on his face. He spit out more blood and raised an eyebrow towards the two of them. Sakura cracked her gloved fists, and Sasuke smirked. This is hardly fair. And your explosions are fair? Sakura seemed somewhat annoyed. Her hair was in disarray, and had taken a perpetually singed look to it. All members of Team 7 perpetually smelled like chakra smoke now. He couldn't help but to smirk. His explosive notes had become somewhat of a matter of concern in Team 7. Yes. He made a hand sign, and they disappeared in an inferno of roaring heat and explosive force. Barely dodging to the left as a series of fireballs barreled toward his head, he felt a hand grabbing him and pulling him to the ground. Sakura loved her grapples. I and the tree above Kakashi watched with a keen eye. Over the past few months, in between the monotony and the odd D-rank his team had grown. He'd focused on practical combat, learning how to fight, and how to fight dirty. How to survive against tougher, stronger opponents, just like his sensei had done to him. Naruto had taken to it like natural. Sasuke and Sakura had been hesitant too, but a few rounds of one-on-one with Naruto, and they too had adopted it. But with their growth, the interest of the politicos had grown as well. Word of the spar between Hiyashi's nephew and Naruto had spread, and soon it came to a situation where all the major clans were calling for his team. All for the same obvious reason. They wanted to vet his team, to see what they could do. Politics would soon start to play on his team. Kakashi raised his eyebrows as the battle swung around. Sakura was on the defensive now as the boys drove on her hard. This happened whenever there was a free-for-all, two teammates joining to attack one. It was interesting, they seemed to do it unconsciously, swinging the focus of the battle from one another, with only a few words uttered in bet when Sakura caught Sasuke's blade with a gloved hand, pulled him close, and drove a haymaker into his belly. Naruto tried to slash at the outstretched hand, but she pulled the appendage back and caught one of his knives. She swung them away, and her hand flashed through hand signs. Sasuke tried to dash forward to stop her, but suddenly fell over, gripping his stomach and retching. Naruto was barely standing himself and looked almost drunk. He looked around, seemed as if he was about to retch too, then suddenly he slid his palm open and blinked as he subtly regained his balance. Holy shit. You like it the hell? Sasuke muttered from his place on the floor. It throws your sense of balance off by changing the flow of chakra in the inner ear. Sasuke retched some more before pulsing his chakra to release himself from the genjutsu. They were back on the offensive again, and Kakashi delved back into his thoughts. The one commonality between them all was that in the end they could all fight in close range. Sasuke was a combination long and close range fighter, launching of ninjutsu from a distance before finally closing ranks and finishing things personally. Sakura could be considered a mid-range fighter, her limited reserves limiting the range of her genjutsu, but again in close combat, she was far more dangerous. Naruto was like Sasuke, using explosive tags to brutal efficiency and his dead-on accuracy to drive his opponents close. Once close, the boy was fast and fluid in his attacks. He smiled, the battle raging in the training grounds, shifted again. Sasuke was on the defensive, doing his best to stay out of range of Sakura's genjutsu. Yet, dodging to the best of his ability Naruto's explosive, Sasuke dodged another explosive kunai, his hands flashing through hand signs. He let out a roaring grand fireball, and his teammates rushed to either side. He closed rank on Sakura and rove his attack brutally, swiping with chakra running through his blade. She dodged a few swings, but more hit home than missed him. An extra deep cut made her shoulder blossom into blood, and Kakashi decided that was enough. His decision was made. His team was ready. He dropped down and threw his three little pups away. They hit the floor with a grunt, and their beady little eyes stared at him in anger. Great way to abuse little kids, sensei. Ma, abuse you? You three abuse your poor sensei all day with your whining. His voice got high as he mocked them. Sensei, we can't move another inch. Sensei, Sasuke can breathe. Sensei, we're going to die if you leave us in this forest for 2 weeks. Sensei, you can't use us for target practice. What? Sakura indignant anger always made him smile. Sasuke really couldn't breathe. One of his lungs collapsed. I got him to the hospital, didn't I? You want some cheese with your wine, Sakura? He feigned annoyance. I never whined as much as you when I was a chunin, he remarked. By this point he'd helped them stand up again. Bet you did, when you were a genin. Naruto chimed in. To me a genin? Never. Your sensei was evaluated a chunin straight out of the academy. True fact. Bullshit. And finally Sasuke. What do genin know? His voice dribbled with condescension. He grabbed the three of them by the scruffs of their shirt. Let's go get lunch, and no whining. Or I'll leave you three out here for a couple more days. After that we can go get our first C rank. The stop there floundering in his hands. C rank? Naruto chimed in. He seemed absolutely pleased. Itachi, his brother, had changed. Sasuke, sweet innocent Sasuke, had changed. His little brother was now a ninja, now just like him, much in the same way that his blonde-haired friend was like him. Months ago he'd met Uzumaki Naruto in person. Seen the blonde-haired boy with his wide-toothed grin and his watching calculating eyes beneath the facade of a child. An unstated understanding had occurred between them. But he hadn't realized how much Sasuke would change in the time period since then. His fun-loving brother was still there, but the innocence was gone. He'd known that would happen eventually, but, still, he'd hoped deep down that Sasuke would remain that innocent little boy he'd seemed like he would always be. His brother was currently taking any of those hopes and stomping them thoroughly into the ground. Come on, Nai-chan, are you even taking this seriously? Itachi grunted in acknowledgement and dodged a kick aimed at his head. Itachi had always known Sasuke was skilled, that he was talented. He hadn't thought his brother was a genius like him, but now, actually trying in a spar against his brother, Itachi wondered how he hadn't spotted it, but Uzumaki Naruto had. He grunted as one of Sasuke's kicks connected with his head. He delivered a palm strike as retribution. Uzumaki Naruto was one of those people that seemed to see people's inherent talents and be able to draw them out. His eyes aimed towards the sky. It was almost noon. Sasuke would be leaving soon. Sasuke, you'll be late if you don't get. His brother looked back, a smirk on his face. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. How could he not worry? He'd held Sasuke in his arms with the solemn realization of exactly how frail a baby could be. He promised his mother to always protect his brother, but now he physically couldn't. Don't worry. He couldn't not worry. Sasuke, just by being Sasuke, made that impossible. He sighed as he walked from the clan training grounds. Sasuke wasn't the only thing on his mind. He'd been promoted to captain. He moved as fast as he could without looking conspicuous in the compound. He was an Anbu captain. Kakashi Haddock's rumored coerced removal from Anbu had left a slot open for captain. A slot that Itachi's squad had decided to apply him for. By the very nature of Anbu, a captain couldn't be assigned. He had to be made captain by his squad. He spotted a head of hair he'd rather not have. He moved even faster now, sprinting full speed to avoid him. Sushi caught him anyway, a grin plastered on his face. Itachi kept his own visage apathetic. Sushi. Are you still mad? No. So yes? He sent an icy glare towards his squad mate and best friend. No. Come on Itachi, it won't be that bad. You will be a great captain. Hell, you're the youngest captain in Konoha history. You even beat Sharingan no Kakashi. The only reason I got the job is because Sharingan no Kakashi resigned. Sushi laughed a little, his grin still not faltering. Look, we've got a mission. He grabbed the scroll Sushi tossed at him with ease, barely thinking about the action at all. His eyes scanned through it. When he was finished, he burned the scroll. Assassination, yeah, I'm surprised too. They almost never send out teams on assassination missions. It's usually solo. Let's go. Sushi looked back at him, his grin gone. Look Itachi, I wouldn't have suggested you to the squad if I didn't think you'd be a decent leader. They sure as hell wouldn't have accepted you if they didn't trust you with their lives. I said I'm not angry about it. But he had been somewhat worried. Thanks. No problem. Naruto Sakura's parents were afraid of him. He sat in muted silence, a smile on his face, and enjoying the rice and steamed fish they had cooked. They were afraid of him, he could feel it, see it in their eyes, or more specifically the way they avoided looking at him. Sakura, he could tell, was noticing it as well. They were courteous to him, nice enough, that was it. He hadn't done anything. He wasn't the loud brash child needing attention. He wasn't pulling pranks and running around the village making a fool of himself. He'd force people to acknowledge him, even as just an annoying little brat. And just an annoying little brat. They were afraid because they didn't know him. Thank you so much for this meal. You're welcome, Naruto-san. They seemed so careful with him. He smiled at them, beaming with wide teeth, letting small amounts of his chakra roll over them in tiny smoothing waves. Sakura noticed immediately, but a quick look between him and her parents, and her eyebrows dropped. The nervous looks they were giving him slowed. They ate their food rather than picked at it like they were doing shortly before. Naruto-san. Sakura's mother spoke for the first time the entire dinner. Yes, I. She stopped for a moment to think. I don't really know you well enough to be asking something like of you, Naruto-san. But please, Sakura, I know she's talented like you, but she's still my little girl. The woman need not even ask. No one would die. No one would have to sacrifice themselves. He wasn't the monster he'd been on the battlefield. His chakra capacity wasn't anywhere near where it was before he came back. He couldn't even use Kurama's chakra without it killing him, or damn near getting close. But no one, absolutely no one would die, especially not on some simple escort mission to Suna. No need to worry. We're a good team, it's just a simple escort mission, and if anything happens we have Kakashi-sensei with us. As long as he's there we'll be fine. He couldn't help but to smile. He poured more of his chakra over them. He finished the last of his meal and helped Sakura clear the table. Then he walked home, his mind reeling. He wasn't the same little boy, he wasn't a little boy at all, not mentally at least. He'd seen his friends die, felt their blood spill on his skin. He'd seen them die for him, spend their lives to give him a few more precious moments, so when he'd arrived he'd been determined. He trained, slowly, carefully watching for chances to learn the things he already grabbed, save him and tied them together as fast as he could. Because he needs Sasuke, he need him like he'd need air. Like the flowers needed the bees. The two would never reach their full potential without one another, and Sakura. Sakura, who was the pillar that held the two of them up. The sole reasons they reached death's door again and again and again, and came back. As he walked home he looked around him. People were staring. He'd learned long ago to ignore their stares, whether it be of spite and eventually adoration. But now the